What would you do to defend your rights? What would you give up? Your job? Your home? Would you do that for somebody else's rights? Meet Vonnie Monroe and Mary Manning.
We weren't getting anything of this. Nothing was going to benefit us. So we were going to just get, as we thought, the right to refuse to handle the goods.
In 1984, they went on strike at a Dublin department store after refusing to sell goods from Apartheid South Africa.
So anybody who said that they were going to refuse to handle the South African goods was put on a till with management standing behind us.
Their dispute became an epic struggle over fundamental human rights. Let's head back to the mid-80s.
There was loads of issues that we wanted to have meetings about with the management, and they just wouldn't. They just refused to even talk to us. So that was the kind of atmosphere that Dunnes had at the time.
Okay, and 1984 and Dublin. I mean, now 2023, Dublin, stags, hens, everyone, it's party city. Vonnie, what was Dublin like in 1984?
It wasn't as busy as it is now. Definitely, we didn't have stags and hens at that time.
Right.
I was 27 years of age.
Yeah,
I had a 3-year-old.
Yeah,
I had a 3-year-old daughter.
Yeah.
And I was separated at that time. And for me, my life was just looking after my daughter. I worked in the office in Dunnes. I had been working in Dunnes for, at that point, probably almost 10 years. But the same management crew were there. Yeah. You always had the same, it wasn't any different working in the office. You still had the same sort of hierarchy. You're looking down on you, really. Young girls working, you know.
Did you know each other before? The shop brought you together. That's where you knew
just seeing each other.
I would have, because we used to get cash from the cash office, so I would have known from that.
There was a big staff. If you can imagine, there was part-time staff, there was full-time staff. We didn't socialise at that time. We were colleagues in work as such. For me, in 84, living in Dublin was just survival, really. I was literally only separated at the time, and I was getting on my feet. I had a home, and I was keeping that going as well. I was paying a mortgage. But, you know, Dublin wasn't a bad place to live. I mean, I know a lot of people at that time, we had the minor strikes here in England, and the economy wouldn't have been fantastic. But everybody was coasting along.
Can we move on to that moment where you, Mary, said, no, I'm not going to handle this product? It was a grapefruit, is that correct?
Two grapefruits.
Two grapefruits, yeah. Tell us about that moment.
Well, the background of the strike, obviously, the union policy came from our union. They had taken a vote at the AGM at Easter of that year to boycott South African goods. So this letter went around, and Karen Guerin, who was the shop steward, came in, read it out. We didn't even know what was South African. We didn't know what apartheid was. None of us knew. But because of all that was happening in the store before this, we had weeks and weeks of them just not wanting to meet with us, just people being bullied all the time. When this policy came in, we thought, great, we're just going to say no. Like, it was more to get against the management. What the management then did was they put us on tills. So anybody who said that they were going to refuse to handle the South African goods was put on a till with management standing behind us.
Where they would have to then handle...
It was only a matter of time before someone actually... So I saw this woman coming towards me, and she had 2 grapefruit in her basket, and I was going, go away. And I always remember Alma was beside me, and I was going, go to Alma. So she came up to me, and I just said to her, look, I'm sorry, it's union policy. And I mean, if she'd questioned me any more about apartheid, what was happening in South Africa, I wouldn't have been able to tell her. And she was fine. She said, oh, okay, that's fine. So she went off, and then the manager who was standing behind me came up and told me to close my register. And I was brought up to the office. Karen, as a shop steward, was brought up, but she wasn't allowed to come into the office with me. I just said, no, I wasn't going to handle the goods. And they said, well, we've no other option but to suspend you.
And then it began. And how did you know it was a South African was there a list by your till or something that said, this is from South Africa?
What we had done once we got the policy in, we went around the store to find it. Because it was a grocery store, it wasn't actually, it was Outspan with the fresh fruit. And then there was tins of Del Monte. They were South African as well. So we literally went around for a couple of days beforehand, finding out what is South African. I knew straight away when she was coming up that these are 2 Outspans. I can't take these. So we had even started, I suppose, to learn even from the first few days. Like, that was the only reason that we knew.
It's a massive moment. You must have been terrified, nervous, a mix of all sorts, knowing that you were probably going to say no to this particular purchase.
Yeah.
That is incredibly strong.
I didn't...
You're 21 years of age.
Yeah. Because I didn't think about the consequences. Like, none of us did. We just kind of said, no, we're not handling them, and that's it.
Did you feel that you would have others supporting you at the time. You had your friends, I know.
Everybody had been talked to about it before. So I knew there were people who were in the union, and I mean, not all of the store were in the union, but there were people who were union members that I did think, hopefully.
Vonnie, how did it trickle down? How did that then begin?
Well, as Mary said, we had a conversation about the product.
Yeah.
Now, even though myself and Teresa were in the office, we had no knowledge of what was going on downstairs because this was all happening. We were closed off in the office. We're 3 flights of stairs up and, in a corridor away from everybody. We learned at break, it was coming up to break time when we came out, and they said, Mary's been suspended. And we said, right, okay, so we've had this conversation, so we're going to go out in sympathy with her.
So you very, very quickly you made that decision.
Well, the decision kind of was made because when the letter came about, the girls on the floor had that discussion as well, and we were part of that discussion at break time.
The management had told us that if it continued, there'd be serious consequences. They didn't say what the serious consequences were going to be, so we knew it was going to come to a head at some stage.
Yeah,
like we didn't know when or who, but we knew it was going to come to a head.
And the group started to form. It started to grow. People started to talk, and it was like...
Well, we at that time, we literally, Teresa and I left the office. We said to the guy, the manager, and we said, Mary's been suspended, so we're going out. She's a union colleague. We're going out in sympathy with her. So it was just like that, just kind of...
Wow.
We all just piled together and walked out. And we had to go over to the union then.
There was probably about 20, maybe a little bit over 20 union members in the store at the time, but they didn't all come out.
No.
And a couple came out and went back in. Like it went back the next day. So it was left then to the kind of core.
To the core.
Yeah.
And when you said you kind of had to go to the, what was that, like a walk over from Henry Street to
just across
to
the
the
road,
union offices?
Across over O'Connell Street. It's a very short walk. You'd get there in 7 minutes, 10
And
minutes.
what was the sort of atmosphere amongst you? I mean, you just literally walked away from the store, your job, your office.
We walked away and we just, like, it's happened. We've had this letter come in. Something is happening now, so we have to go over and tell the union. We've carried out their instruction. And where do we take it from there?
Yeah.
It was the 19th of July. It was a beautiful, sunny, hot day. And we were thinking, great, a couple of days off work. We'll stand outside for a couple of days.
2 weeks to get out of this.
Yeah. We didn't even think 2 weeks, I don't think.
Yeah.
So that's literally what was going on.
Had you ever been on strike before?
Yeah. But like that, as Mary said, 2 or 3 days.
Yeah.
And then we'd have talks and then it could be trashed out.
Right. So you assume the same for this? Yeah.
Didn't even really.
We weren't looking for money. We weren't looking for new uniform.
Yeah.
It was a discussion to be had as far as we were concerned around the sale of this produce. But after the letter, they had obviously got a copy of the letter. They had their conversations, and as Mary said, the management said, there'll be consequences. That's what they said.
The union represented workers in Roach's stores, in Marks and Spencer's, in Arnott's, in other places around Dublin. And they all allowed the staff to refuse to handle the South African goods. Some of them just turned a blind eye to it, but some of them were allowed not
handle it.
I think most stores took shirts that were made in South Africa. So it was just Dunnes' attitude that said, okay, well, if you do as you're told.
Roach's stores was there.
Right beside us.
Dunnes was there.
Yeah.
Same type of style, drapery, clothing and food.
Right.
So the management obviously in that company or their boards, whoever they were dealing with, they came to the conclusion, okay, well, let's take them off and just stop this before it starts.
Yeah.
So you meet your union representative and you
Brendan.
tell Brendan that
the trigger's been pulled.
The trigger's been pulled. A grapefruit is not going to be handled. We're out.
Yeah.
And then what? Do you have to kind of go back in, get your out for your clothes? Or
No, we had them.
So you were bagged up. You had everything.
Oh yeah. You don't have much. Look, to be honest with you, you've a locker. They used to be paranoid about people stealing stuff. Yeah. We used to leave the store. Listen, we used to leave the store and we'd show them our bag that we had nothing belonging to the store in it. You
were searching on the way out.
You're searching
of work.
No, they didn't pat you down, but they just you opened your bag to make sure there was no. And a security guard used to stand and like he's supposed to be your colleague in the store as part of the store. He'd stand there, have a look. And good night now. Yeah, good night. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
And so. Then you didn't step back in, Or
No, that was
it.
Once we went out, that was
Once we
it.
went
And
out, yeah.
Brendan then gave us placards. We got the placards.
Yeah.
that day.
Yeah, how long was
Yeah.
it before
That
that
day.
meeting with Brendan, before suddenly you're out and you've
That
got your
day.
placards?
We were
And
back
We
down
had to
that
have them for the
afternoon.
next day because we were out.
We were that day.
We were out.
that day, I
It
think,
was
didn't we?
early, but we had them. But our first full day, the next
The
day
first full day.
of being
hadn't
on
gone
strike,
back
as we
down
were concerned, was that day.
Incredible. And then,
Yeah.
so did someone turn up first that following day, or was it all of you a
Oh,
group?
no,
or
we were
what?
all there on time.
9 o'clock in the morning. You were
It was
there.
a job after that.
That was it.
It was
that
our job.
That was your job, yeah.
So
9
that
to
was
5.
it, 9
Yeah,
o'clock.
9 to 6 or whatever it was, yeah.
Out with the
And
placards.
late on a Thursday night,
yeah.
because they opened late. And early if the delivery people were coming in, because there was a delivery entrance at the back of the store. And they would go in, they'd be in and out earlier. So we would make sure that there was some this all didn't happen overnight.
Yeah.
So it kind of evolved into, we realized, okay, some of the union members of like people who were delivery men wouldn't pass the picket. So then what they did was they actually got the guy who used to take rubbish away. He then started to bring in goods, in and out goods out the back entrance of the store. So we started to realize this, and then we started to put picket on the back door. Now, granted, there was only 9 of us, so there was 3 entrances. There was a front entrance, there was a side entrance, and then there was the back end. And the back entrance was where all the fun was, because the police would be around there and no one could see it. It was a public walkway, but it was where people were, like Tommy was arrested from there, and it was where all the trouble happened. A lot happened there.
Vonnie, you go out on strike, you don't get paid your wage, do you?
Yeah.
It changes, it all changes. So tell us a little bit about, what was that like for you? You've said,
I know, yeah.
a single mum recently separated a 3-year-old daughter.
Yeah.
What was that?
With a mortgage. As the other girls were thinking, we'd be out for 2 weeks. I can, weather this for a couple of weeks and see how I go.
Right, okay.
And as time was going on, it was getting more difficult because I couldn't pay my mortgage. And I had to go to my mortgage provider and just ask them for some leniency, and I'd pay them some money. Not my full mortgage, but I could, because I was, I didn't have it to pay. We were getting £21.
£21 initially. We got a rise to £23.
£21?
£21, yeah.
Yeah.
So,
and I think the wages in Dunnes at the time, they weren't bad. The wages weren't too bad in regards to Dublin wages. I think it was about £80 or something.
Yeah, it was good money because we were in Dublin.
Yeah.
Dublin got different money. Doesn't happen now, I think. I think they all get the same money.
Okay.
But the union was strong enough to always, for when wage agreements were going, they were in there fighting, and we always got our rises, and when our increments, we were always able to get them.
So to start with, you're out the placards and you think it's going to be for a couple of weeks. When did you start to think, Mary, actually, this might not be 2 weeks?
It probably would have been a few months into it, because initially the Irish anti-apartheid movement, the next day he came down to the picket line. Then a couple of weeks later, there was different people kind of came down. But then after a while, things just kind of went very quiet, because I think what happened was we were a trade union strike. So that put some people off. And then the issue that was because of South Africa, we had the church talking against us. Like the priests in Mass used to stand up and say, go into Dunnes. And so these people are doing...
Why do you think the church was...
Because I think there was too many links between South Africa, the church,
right,
and Ben Dunne. Ben Dunne had a huge influence over the church as well.
Right.
So I think it was probably it would have been probably October, November. And it was freezing cold.
Weather changing.
And I think what happened was no one was taking any interest. Like Brendan and the union were trying to get the government involved, saying like it's really a government issue. But no one wanted to get involved with it. They wanted to kind of it's too hot an issue to actually touch. We had people coming up to us on the picket line and telling us, you're hurting the black people of South Africa. You're taking their money out of their hands. And what changed that for us was Nimrod Sejake coming to the picket line.
Who was Nimrod Sejake?
He was in exile in Ireland at the time. He was an ex-ANC. He was a teacher, but he hadn't been back in South Africa for, I can't remember how many years. So he was in exile here, and it was Labour youth or militant youth that brought him to the picket line to us. And he just came every single day. And he actually spoke to us and explained to us what was happening in South Africa and how black people weren't allowed to marry, they weren't allowed to own land, they had to have a passbook all the time. I think it was something like 80% of the people or 90% of the people were black. And these were being held by white people who owned the riches in the world, in the land.
So Vonnie, did you start to learn a lot more about
Absolutely. You
what
would not believe.
I know you
how-
said initially it was all about management and the Dunnes wanting to go against, but then suddenly it changes and you start to learn more about actually the initial
Absolutely.
anti-apartheid.
We didn't have a huge amount of knowledge.
No.
You know, we only knew where Africa was.
Yeah.
Basically.
Nelson Mandela probably.
We heard, you were talking about what was time was going on, and we got to November, it was getting cold, and then we met this man, and he was given testimony from living there and all what kind of a life he had and his family have. And this was an educated man. He wasn't just somebody that heard a story. You know, he lived it. He tried to better his own family. He tried to get them educated as well, you know, to help within the ANC, of course, because he was a member of the ANC.
Yeah.
But the minute he started to tell us about what went on, and I just the penny kind of dropped me. So you mean because the colour of your skin? It's just the colour of your skin. This is happening to you. I couldn't get my head around that, you know, at the time. And all the while, when I used to go home and I would tell my mother about, you know, what went on about that man telling us, Nimrod telling us about that. And I said, imagine if we were all black here now, ma'am, what would we do? We'd never be able to have a house. We'd never be able to have, you know, get educated. We'd never be able to go, you know, hold down jobs. You know, I had 9 in family and they were all working at this stage, you know what I mean? And all had good jobs, but that would never happen for us, you know. And
so did you start to feel very passionately now about South Africa?
That's what was
and about that
all
movement?
of us. I think it happened for us all at that point.
What Nimrod did was he changed it from being a piece of paper, a policy on a piece of paper that the union sent us,
became
to
real and human.
that we passionately believed, absolutely believed.
Yeah.
And
what was he like? What kind of a
he was very quiet,
So soft,
like he was very soft, but he wasn't one of these people who came and told you, no, this is what you have to do. And he just generally every day came along and walked with us for hours, and because we walked up and down.
Do you remember the day he first arrived?
I think it was. We went out on July 19th, and I think he came down definitely within 2 weeks. He was down.
Wow.
And was there until the very end. Like he was there until he came down. I'd say 99% of the days he was there. So
he had family still in South Africa.
We actually, when we went to Nelson Mandela's funeral. We actually went to Nimrod's house and met his 2 daughters, granddaughter, and his son. His son is just. It was
just like looking at Nimrod.
Yeah.
Was Nimrod alive? He was
dead, and then he died. I think it was 2009.
Wow! And there's a load of you. You're all women, with the exception of Tommy. You've got Tommy, and you've got Brendan, and you've got Nimrod. These men. Can you tell us? You've told us a little bit about Nimrod. Tell us a little bit about Brendan, Mary.
He was what I would call a trade union leader. He was the one that we went to.
Did you trust him?
Oh,
implicitly.
Absolutely. Absolutely, yeah.
Anything he told us we would do, you know. He would suggest a route to take and stuff.
He ended up I was lifelong friends with him up until he died. Like he just, he was as passionate about South Africa as we were. Like we ended up being. I suppose he was there from the first day. And he literally used to give up his Saturdays to come down to the picket line and stand all day on the picket line. He actually got into trouble with the trade union over a few things that happened on the picket. But the person who you go to, if you've got a problem in your job, should be the one person that you can trust and is going to say, I've got your back. And Brendan had our back.
Bonnie, did you go to him? Did you?
We were the trade union.
Yeah.
The members of the trade union, that's who a union is. It's its members. And the likes of Brendan, they worked for us as far as we were concerned.
Yeah.
This is the view that we took anyway. And when we went to them with a problem, we hoped that they would be able to solve our problem for us.
Yeah.
Now, we did get to a point where the hierarchy were telling us, time to go back to work now, girls.
Well, there was that moment, wasn't there? The big union saying, go back to work.
Yeah. But Brendan never said that to us.
No.
Never.
He didn't say that.
He believed in us that we were doing the right thing because he was as passionate about it as we were.
Yeah.
I'm talking about 2 years into this.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And we did, a lot had happened to a lot of people, you know.
But the reason why that you were told to go back in was because they promised that there would be there was going to be changes. Is that right?
No, there was loads of different,
the anti-apartheid movement wanted
I think people were embarrassed by us. You've got the Irish anti-apartheid movements, and they were very good, and they did give us money, and they did come down, and certain members of the Irish anti-apartheid movement came down onto the picket line. But they had been doing this for years. They've been doing, as we used to say, their cheese and wine parties, and nothing really happened.
Absolutely.
And then all of a sudden, here's these young workers in the middle of Dublin, And they're just getting...
You're making noise.
Making noise.
And we were
and a bit
women.
of embarrassment.
And you're women and Tommy.
Yeah.
Had we would all been, if there was 10 men there might have been a different story.
They couldn't control us either as well.
No, yeah.
And they told us to go back to work. They told us we'd made your point and it's time for you to go back to work.
That is what you just said then. I mean, that's one of the things I think, one of the most powerful things about this is the amount of women at the centre of it all.
Yeah.
Were you being hassled at all? You know, as women, were men rude towards you?
No, I think we were able to handle ourselves.
You could handle yourself at that young age.
Yeah.
The back door was where we got all the trouble from the delivery
that was
guys.
very masculine because
and that would have been
so
a purely
many men
masculine. Yeah, but
delivering.
yeah.
You know what I mean?
They,
the brute
Yes,
force
yeah.
was the back
But
there.
And you weren't scared. You weren't nervous. You handled that. You stuck together.
We used to go home black and blue. Really, a lot of times.
I remember one time this fella. Do you remember the other security lad? He was closing the door down on us.
Yeah,
we were in there and he was trying to close the door. And I said, "You close that door down, and I'm going to have you charged with false imprisonment because you're closing that door." And I said, "And I have a child I need to go home to. But if you imprison me here, I can't go and get her. And they'll think I'm neglecting my child and I'm not. So I want you to keep that door open."
Yeah.
So, think you know everything, don't you? I said, "No, but I know what I'm talking about now." So he pulled the door up and he just left us sitting there.
Well, but what they used to do then was it was like a shutter 10, 15 feet across. There was a step of about kind of 2 feet maybe, and we'd sit on it to stop them from getting the deliveries in. But they'd actually get the shutter, a couple of them, and pull it down really quick. And so it got you on the back. Like, you know, you literally go home and be black and blue.
I think that's why we hopped into the actual bay. That's where we were sitting at the time when that guy was pulling it down and leaving us there, he said.
And what about from the workers themselves? You must have had friends that didn't come out with you, did you?
Yeah. Well,
that must have been really difficult, was it?
I had my 21st was 9 days beforehand, I think it was. Some of the people who were
at that party
walked by. And in the end, because the canteen was like 3 flights of stairs up, and we were picketing on the front part, they used to throw things out the windows there, as like tea bags and tomatoes and stuff and cups of tea down on top of us. And then what they'd do is they'd walk in with their, especially at Christmas time. I remember the
bonus,
first, what will I buy with my bonus today? And then they just call us names and stuff, but we didn't care. We did call them as many names back.
To me, they were the same as Dunnes stores, as the management in Dunnes stores. So, I mean, if when the management walking by, you just ignore them anyway as well. So you just had to ignore those girls as well.
Did anyone else join you at all over time? That was it?
No.
That initial number, that stayed at that?
It went down a little bit and then stayed at 9.
It stayed at 9?
Yeah.
Vonnie, can you tell us a little bit about Tommy? Who was Tommy?
Tommy was a part-time worker initially. And I mean, I didn't work with Tommy. Mary worked with Tommy because he was on the floor.
Right.
You know. But Tommy decided he was going to walk out as well.
No, Tommy, what happened was we were out in the picket line and Tommy started his shift at 5 o'clock. And he came in to start his shift and saw the picket and said, "I'm not going in." And that was it.
That was it?
That was it,
yeah.
And I mean, in fairness, I don't know how Tommy ever put up with us because we used to drive him nuts.
Right.
And I would have a close relationship with Tommy. Even now, I still have a close relationship with Tommy.
Do you?
Yeah, I do.
He's so talented, Tommy.
Yeah.
Really?
You would not believe.
I didn't
Carpentry.
know, like, until a few years ago, we were out at his house.
Oh,
He
yeah.
built all these like wooden chairs and and he said he was a carpenter before he ever started.
Well, he should have never left his carpentry.
Right.
I've known Tommy 30 years and I didn't know that.
Right.
So it's just,
So how did you get through it in terms of those long days and those many, many hours? And was it on a rota? How did you work it out?
It had to become a rota because you'd be...
Most times we finished at about 6 or when...
when the shop was finished.
closed.
On a Thursday it was 8, 9. And then if we knew a delivery was coming in.
Okay.
Sometimes we came in early just to kind of catch deliveries to try and stop them. But it literally went like that. Okay, you're on today. And what happened then after that was we started to get some support. So people would come down to the picket line to give us a hand.
Yeah.
But then people wanted us to go and speak at things. So then like Catherine and myself spent a good bit of time in England actually as well, going around.
Well, the miners' strike was on around the same
And
time.
why did they want you to speak? It was to share your story, what you were up to.
The other trade unions would bring us to places. The strike had probably been going on for 5 or 6 months and more maybe, and people kept bringing you over to places but someone had to cover you when you were off the picket line. It became a rota, and it was...
Did the store try and take advantage of you not being present and kind of get stuff in and deliver stuff. And
There was only one time I
Yeah.
think we ever stopped deliveries for a day, and the day that we closed the shop, we only closed it one time ever. But other than that, I mean, on a Saturday we always had a mass picket, so people would come down and it'd be like a couple of hundred people maybe on picket line.
yeah,
Monday to Friday, you wouldn't even know we were there. Like, there wouldn't-
really,
there's
okay.
so many people going in and out of the shop and bustling around that like there's maybe
Yeah.
4 of us in the front.
But generally, there was a fall off in a footfall because we were able to walk up and down.
Yeah.
Before you couldn't walk up and down, especially if it was a sale period. You
Because
couldn't
there
walk
were so
up
many
and down.
people on the pavement.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, but
Yeah.
there definitely was an impact.
It did,
you know,
and
on
certain days
their,
had bigger impacts than
Yeah.
And then what happened was, I think the first kind of time that people kind of started to take notice was when Desmond Tutu asked to meet Karen and myself over, and he was going over to collect his Nobel Peace Prize. So here we had a black man, a man of the church, a South African, standing by us and telling us we were doing the right thing. So that's when people started to kind of think, well, maybe it isn't.
Maybe this is serious.
Yeah.
Maybe this is.
So it turned it. And then,
You met him, Maria.
yeah,
You met Desmond Tutu.
yeah. He's a lovely man.
What was that like? Can you just tell us a little
I
bit?
remember as we met him in London. He was actually in the airport. Karen, myself.
What at Heathrow?
He was coming. He was
Yeah.
coming from South Africa, and he was going over to collect his Nobel Peace Prize.
he sent us lovely messages.
Yeah. But I remember being
Support,
in
you know.
the
Nice.
room going in to meet him, and I remember thinking, how do you greet a bishop? Like, I've never met a bishop before, and especially in Ireland, like they'd be very kind of. He came over and just came over and gave us just a big hug. So that was like it.
Wow.
It was like, but that was definitely one of the first turning points in it.
Wow. I suppose for you, it must have been like a confirmation, if you like.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
a legitimacy.
And but not for. I mean, I suppose at that stage we knew what we were doing and we
Yeah.
knew why
Yeah.
we were doing it.
but for others
for the public,
and the church.
because there was very little coming out of South Africa at the time. I think there was a media ban at the time anyway.
Right.
So very little was being said about what was in South Africa, so what was happening there. So people weren't learning from the news, and we didn't have social media the way you have it now, where you could pick up your phone and find
Right.
out whatever you wanted.
Yeah.
So you needed to wait until it was actually shown on TV or
Yeah.
a newspaper or whatever. But because of who he was and because of the Nobel Peace Prize, people instantly knew about it. So it was one of the bigger turning points in the strike.
Vonnie, as time goes on, it must have been getting harder and harder and harder.
Mm-hmm. Yep, it certainly was.
With, as you said,
my
a
daughter
mortgage,
was,
a daughter,
and my
a home.
Well, that went. I was taken to court I had to surrender the home because I couldn't.
Did you have an opportunity to save it?
Brendan came at me and we thought that's what we would do. Could I get an extension and just, I'll pay what I can just to keep a roof over our head. This strike's not going to last forever. They didn't give it, So the home was taken off me. And they gave me a council flat down in the same area, with 1 bedroom council flat. But I wasn't coming out of there crying, or I was sad, for a short while. But, I had to focus on why was I doing this? Why was I letting my home go? Because I was doing it because of the horrendous life that children my daughter's age were having
in South Africa.
And adults like myself as
in
well.
South Africa.
Purely because, as I said, I couldn't get over this thing of the colour of your skin. Just purely.
Did you get a lot of hassle from other family members? Did they understand what this decision you were making?
They kind of just didn't talk about it, because if I talked about it to them, they had to realise what was going on and they had to be more supportive than what they were. But my mother was very supportive.
Was she?
Very, very supportive, yeah. So she's told me to stop paying the mortgage. You're not going anywhere with this. Keep the money for yourself. They're going to take it from you. I've seen things like, not in trade union wise, but I've seen things happen, people, she said. And in the end, they always win. They're the bigger people. They always win. The banks always win.
Was there a moment, Mary, were there many moments, is there one particular moment where you can remember where you thought, I can't do this anymore. It's done. It's over.
I think over the time of the strike, there was probably times when we we ever thought we'd go back or anything, but everybody got a period of time where they were like down. So we'd rally around each other, and that was how we ended up, like, just picking each other up. So you'd know that someone was looking, that they weren't very happy or they were upset about something, and we'd all rally around. And I think because it was such a small group of people, I think that was a benefit for us in the end, because we were so close. we became so close that it was just a really tight-knit bond. So we knew what each other were thinking, and we knew if someone was down or whatever, that you just kind of, or someone take them off for a cup of tea. And I wouldn't say there was any time where I actually thought I'm going to go back, because I never thought that. I actually thought at one stage that it would end, that we'd all just have to walk away. That was how I thought it was going to end, because there didn't seem to be, there was no end in sight. There was no one that wanted to do anything for us. Like, it really was bleak, and it was hot, cold weather, and we were getting like £23 at that stage. We got a rise a month. But people started to give us some support. And then again, it was Bishop Tutu, and the second time when he invited us to go over to South Africa for a day trip that we went on.
Yeah, you were invited to South Africa.
Yeah.
Was that to try and to give you an opportunity to see what you were actually striking for, the kind of situation?
Yeah, he wanted to bring us around to, obviously, to the townships and stuff, and show us what people are living in. And we obviously hadn't got the money. The union
to go to.
No.
So you were going to have to fund it yourself.
Yes.
We did some pub. We went around the pubs on I think we had 3 Friday nights we did it.
What, in Dublin?
Yeah. So eventually, between one thing and another, I think the union might have donated a small amount. We got the money to go for us to go.
What, for all of you?
So 7 of us, I think.
Right.
And we got over to, we had to fly from London, or Dublin to London, and then we were going London to Johannesburg.
Yeah.
We got in early because our flight was early, and we went and we boarded. We got our boarding passes, put our cases in.
This is in London?
In Heathrow. And then after a while, British Airways, we were travelling with British Airways, and they came over and asked us, were we travelling? And we said, yeah, but you're not going to be allowed on. You don't have a visa to go to South Africa, so you're not going to be allowed to go. You're not going to be allowed to go into the country. So can you take your bags and can you claim it? And we said, no, we're not like identifying our bags. And anyway, at that stage, an Irish person with an Irish passport did not need a visa. Now, you've got to remember as well, no mobile phones. I went to a payphone. We all did. We were 3 hours being told we weren't going to be allowed on the flight. I rang home, my next door neighbour, because we didn't have a phone, said, look, I'll probably be home tomorrow because I'm not letting us on the flight.
Was the flight still on tarmac?
And what they didn't know was that we had journalists that were travelling with us who had been allowed to go onto the flight. So they didn't know this. And after 3 hours, they literally ran us down onto the flight. But they separated us all. So none of us were sitting together. And what we found out later from the journalists was that the captain had come onto the flight and said that they were sorry for the delay, but there's people who were refusing to board. So you can imagine sitting beside someone after an 8-hour flight who thought that you were after delaying.
This person's refused.
Yeah.
And then the flight eventually took off. Went down to Joburg.
Yeah. We getting off the plane, and there was loads of soldiers around, armed soldiers, and we kind of thought, maybe it's normal. We didn't really know, like we'd never been there before. So we went into the terminal, and these armed soldiers with machine guns come over to us, and someone came over as a representative and said, are you the group travelling from Dublin? And we said, yes. And they said, follow us. So up these flights of stairs, at one stage there was 32 armed guards with us. There was some before us and some behind us. Brought us up to this room. We'd heard so many stories at this stage of people falling out police windows and being killed and never been seen again. And at this stage, nobody knew where we were, because we'd rang home and said, we're going to be home tomorrow because they're not letting us on the flight. So we didn't have time to ring and say,
of course.
Going.
I mean, it's a 10, 12-hour flight down to South Africa. Yeah.
So there was no Irish embassy there at the time. There was the consulate was there. So they wouldn't even come to talk to us. They brought our suitcases up and searched everything, like took everything apart. They eventually sent us some food. We were held for about 8 or 9 hours, I think it was. And then we were sent back on the next flight. So we had a day trip out to South Africa.
But they said you were terrorists.
Oh, no, that's what happened in the media reported over there, that we were terrorists. And the front page of the Irish Time, or our Irish Independent, I think the next day was, we were the most dangerous shop workers in the world. That Brendan always quoted that. So that was my parents woke up that day they thought I was in London, and they woke up to seeing that we were being held in South Africa. So, and as I said, no mobile phones, were you
emails. Scared, Mary? Were there times?
Shitless at times.
Really?
Yeah, for a while we were. Then we started to get, we thought, okay, they're not going to. After a few hours, they gave us food, and we thought, grand. So we started to sing a few rebel songs, and we started to kind of get a bit more brave. And then we were put back onto the plane. And as they were going up the stairs, Karen turned around and said, we'll be back when South Africa is free, and stood at the top of the stairs of the plane. And Sandra pushed her and said, get on that fucking plane. We're never taking So, I'm sorry, I shouldn't be using the language. So they sent us back, and then we arrived in London, and they actually said to us, when the flight came to a stop, can you hang on here? And we thought, oh no, here we go again. But they actually brought us in for a press conference. So at the time we thought that, we would have loved
Brendan
to get
there
in.
waiting?
Brendan was with us. Brendan
was with you.
Brendan
He was on.
Yeah. But at the time we thought that we'd get in and we'd get a bit of publicity for it. And, it'd be the biggest publicity that it could have ever done was to not let us in. Because people then started to ask, well,
what's this about?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So they did us a favour, even though at the time we didn't think it was a favour.
Of course
they
not.
did us a favour by doing that, because they wanted to know, like, people would start to ask, what are they doing that's so wrong?
Yeah.
What is going on over there that they don't want people to see?
So again, Mary, like another turning point, like you said, the arrival of Nimrod, there are various stages that it started to turn and get bigger and bigger and bigger.
Yeah. And I think probably around the kind of later on that year, September, October of the same year, I think the government started to realise we're not going away. They're just going to stay there. We were picketing the Dáil. We were like doing kind of as much as we could. And then we had to lift the picket.
So let's leap forward a little bit to the latter stages of the strike. How long did it take before you knew that actually what you were standing for was actually going to make a difference? There was going to be some sort of change.
There was talks with the union, and Rory Quinn was the agricultural, wasn't he? The agriculture. He was a Labour TD, and he was in government at the time. Fine Gael and Labour were a coalition at the time, and he pushed for the talks to begin and to try and get some sort of movement on it.
And what was it you were after? What was it
to ban
you wanted?
South African produce?
No, initially just
fruit and veg first.
No, initially what we wanted was just the right not to handle them. Just give us the right not to handle the goods.
Right, and then that moved on to...
But what happened was that no one could force Dunnes to give us that right. So what they thought was, okay, we go in a government way and see if they can boycott the goods. But that wasn't what we actually went on strike for. So
not to handle them, but... realistically, they can't come into the country and we won't be handling it, because Dunnes, if they're the cheapest, that's where they're going to be in Dunnes stores. So I had to turn a little on that, And those negotiations went on for months.
And what they did was they said that they eventually said they would think about it, they were going to make a decision on it, but they asked us to lift a picket. So we didn't want to lift a picket. Like, that meant it was their focus for the past year and a half, 2 years. And we were afraid that people would forget about us. Then the government would forget about it.
Would put it on the long finger, as they do.
Conveniently and disappear.
It would fade into the background.
So eventually they said, right, they're going to ban South African goods, but it's not going to be till next year. But when we tried to go back to work, they wanted us to sign that we would do more or less whatever they wanted, that we would never refuse
change
to
your contract,
which we wouldn't do. So then we had to go back out again, and we didn't go back in until April the 9th or so.
So how long
I
were
didn't
you
go
out?
back in.
How long were you out on strike for?
2 years and 9 months.
2 years and 9 months.
The strike lasted for 2 years and 9 months.
Yeah, July 1984 to April 1987.
You thought it was going to be 2 weeks, and it was for 2 years and 9 months.
And then I had to take them to the Labour court because I didn't want my contract changed. They wanted me to go back, and I said, no, I'm not going back. I have a daughter to look after. And my contract was Monday to Friday, 1 day off a week. And so, no, it was ruled against me. So I left.
For you, Vonnie and Mary, was it worth it?
Yes.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
That's only 3 years out of our life, remember. These people are putting up with this from birth to death.
It's something I think we're all very proud of.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's not it's not something I go around shouting about, but I often think of the people who didn't go out and how they would feel, especially when they think about what it was that we were standing for. We weren't getting anything of this. Nothing was going to benefit us. So we were going to just get, as we thought, the right to refuse to handle the goods.
That was probably the most telling thing about the strike, was we weren't going out for pay. We weren't going out for conditions for us. It was for other people.
You were going out for people.
Yeah. And, I wondered, halfway through, why is the other people not helping these people? I used to question the anti-apartheid movement, that it took us, women and Tommy, to do this, where they'd been at it for years and years and years. I felt lip service was being done for years and years and years.
For a lot of years in Ireland, I mean, there was a lot of lip service paid. I mean, I'm not saying that because they did some good work as well.
No, they probably
But-
had believed in what they were doing as well.
Yeah.
You know,
But it's so, I
they
mean,
cared.
for me anyway, it's something that, I mean, my name is always associated with it. And my poor mother used to have nearly heart attacks because she's saying, you're never going to get it. And I didn't. I mean, I had to go to Australia because I wouldn't have got a job in Ireland again for a while anyway.
Yeah.
And even now I wouldn't say it. But it's something that just in here, in your heart, you know, I did the right thing.
Absolutely. So I'm going to ask, would you do it again?
For sure. I probably would, if I knew what was happening, like, you'd do it a bit more intelligent, you'd know how to, like, what to do, but for 100% would do.
Vonnie Monroe?
Yeah, there's different steps you could have taken. We could take now, but we
We
know
learned
that
a lot.
we know how to do it right this time. If we were to do it again.
2 years and 9 months on strike. Just let that sink in for a moment. And imagine the sheer stamina of Vonnie, Mary and their fellow strikers. Next up, in Activism in the 80s, we get a window into the life of black South Africans under apartheid.
People were being forcibly removed. My schoolmates were being evicted from their houses during their secondary school years. So the school, in a sense, became an island in this particular neighborhood.
Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next episode.